here back in Blake's garage for an update. Pretty big one too.
Yeah, so we're making quite a bit of progress on the heavy fabrication. I think in the last video I noted that the biggest thing we had left to build that was complicated to fabricate was the intake manifold. And so we have about 95% of an intake manifold.
Yeah, man, I can't say enough good things about this because you literally just made this from scratch. Besides, the runners here that came from the intake part that we bought off the NASC 300 intake that we bought off eBay. But all this stuff is just completely fabricated just from you in this garage, which is just awesome. I think it looks great. I don't know if you want to talk about kind of what you went through to put it together.
So again, in the last video I talked about essentially I was going to just kind of lop off what was there on the intake manifold to begin with because the runners were too long to fit any kind of useful plenum volume in the space we had. And since we can't bring the motor really anywhere else other than where it is, we need to fit a plenum in the space that we had. So what I did was I cut, it's a little more than an inch off the length of the runners. And I just threw them in a bandsaw and cut them down level. And then I used a straight edge to basically work them back. Because when you throw them in a bandsaw, they're close, but they're not perfect. I didn't jig it or anything. I just jammed it through. So I took a straight edge and worked them back until I had less than a 1/16 of an inch of gap to the flange. And then the entire plenum and the plenum flange that it's built off of is all 3/16 inch 3003 aluminum. I use 3003 because it welds nice. 6061 has a tendency to get brittle. It can be difficult to weld without annealing, or difficult to bend in the press without annealing it as well. 3003 bends pretty easy and welds pretty easy. And then it's 3/16, so that's almost a 1/4 inch thick.
Yeah.
So it's fairly beefy.
Yeah, it's definitely there is no amount of boost that I'm going to be able to put through this that's going to damage this, that's for sure. And I'm not going to be light on the boost either. Like I said, I plan on pushing it to 40 psi just to see what it'll do. But that's not going to come anywhere close to doing anything to that intake. That thing is beefy McBeefins.
Right.
So she's strong.
Yeah, so essentially it was, once that was cut down, that flange was made, and then I marked where all the runners were, and then took a step bit and opened those holes up about 3/4 of what they needed to be. And then I welded it all on. Once it was all welded, which that wasn't super fun, I had to do a lot of grinding and cleanup work and torch it to get as much of the impurities out of the old cast as I could. And then that cast melts at a lot cooler temperature than that plate does. So you have to basically you have to work the torch in the plate and get the plate going and then kind of flow it up into the runners in order to get a nice, good amount of penetration on both sides. If you start with the runners, you won't get good penetration in the plate. So once that was done, I actually this is a Porter cable wood router that I borrowed from a friend of mine's father because I'm not a woodworker. And I just used a 1/4 inch roundover bit, which I have one of these sitting right here. So this is a roundover bit. What essentially this does is there's a bearing that follows the inner profile, and then there's an arc in this that cuts with a piece of carbide a 1/4 inch roundover. So basically you get a nice smooth bell mouth entrance into the runners, so you don't just have that sharp transition that upsets the air. So basically you take that on that router and you just run it along over and over and slowly working it out until you clear all that aluminum out. And actually wood equipment will work aluminum pretty well as long as you don't try to go too aggressive with it. It'll actually cut it pretty nicely. So once that was done, then I have a pretty big press brake underneath the nasty old sheet back there. But that's what I used to create the plenum itself. It was done in 2 pieces just because it exceeds 90 degrees. So because of that, I can't fit one piece in the press brake. I can't do that many angles in it. I would need either an offset finger brake or something to do it. So it was done in 2 pieces, and then those were tigged on the outside. I cut a 45-degree chamfer on both pieces so you get really good penetration. And then it was fully tigged on the outside and then fully tigged on the inside just to give it a little bit more strength. And then once the plenum was fit to the flange on the runners, they're just about an inch all the way around, or an inch on all 4 corners on the inside, just to get, again, to try to minimize any stress risers I could once we start really boosting it. And then the rear panel was set all of these joints here, if we bring the camera over here, all these joints along here, these were built with about a 1/16 of an inch of overlap between the pieces. So basically you had about 1/8 of an inch of the plate and 1/8 of an inch of the plenum, so that you could work the weld in between those and flow the bead back and forth between them, which is why, if you look, it's got a little bit of a weave pattern to it. Again, that was just done to make sure we got as much penetration in both pieces of material as possible. It's really important, since we're going to be boosting this, that again, that we get as good of consistent penetration as possible. And there's some spots where the welds to the runners aren't gorgeous, but they should be plenty strong. I don't expect we should have any weld failures here. And then the front plate, what's left here, this is basically, this will get built the same way. What I'll do is I'll cut a plate here that'll be fitted to this, and this needs leveled out in a few little things. But I'll cut that plate to fit this tightly. And then there's going to be an adapter plate to hold an LS 90mm gold blade throttle body, so that'll stick out to about right here. And essentially what I'll do is the same thing I did with the runners, is I'll cut a hole behind that throttle body adapter flange, then I'll use the router to cut it, and that'll again give it a bell mouth to the inside, and then that'll get welded onto here. And then a couple other things we're going to add to this. This will get a doubler plate, probably underneath it, just so that it looks cleaner. And we'll drill that and tap it with 1/8 NPT, and probably one with 3/8 NPT, so that we can pick up for the brake booster, and we can pick up for the vacuum system to run wastegates, map signal, everything that needs a signal. And we may add a couple little brackets underneath it to put like a vacuum distribution block. But my intention is to hide all that stuff down underneath the intake. So it'll make it slightly more annoying when we run those hoses, but those aren't things you usually need to get to very often. And if we hide it under there, it just kind of keeps everything else clean.
Keep everything else clean looking. I'm sure there's going to be enough wires and hoses as it is, being the turbo setup that we have. But if we can keep it, looking fairly clean, I mean, it just gives it that extra look too. That's just nice, even if it's just a little bit more work. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and then there's a couple little bungs that were here that are like M6. I don't know what they were for originally, but I left them because we can use those to tie the harness in for the injectors.
Perfect. Yeah.
So little things like that, keeping the wires managed and organized, it really makes a big difference in not just the appearance of the car when it's done, but also the reliability. So. And then we're starting to get some of the accessories in place to figure out what needs to go where.
So we got the power steering pump on here.
Yeah, this fitting here, I know this is a common issue on the Supras or on the 2Js from what I've read, where it kind of points pretty much directly at the throttle body when you do a front-facing intake manifold. So I'm just going to cut this, and I'll take like a 10AN fitting or just a barb fitting on here to duck underneath that throttle body, and then we'll locate a reservoir somewhere. We'll just fabricate one that needs to live here. So that'll get done in place, and then working on the charge pipes at the moment. We've got the last couple of V-bands we need for the precision, so that we can finish the hot side of the charge pipes. And then the cold side, obviously we can't do till we get the throttle body finished. But we're gonna bring it up through this. There's this great big honking hole here. So I've actually got the pipes cut to come up through that. I ran out of argon today, so I wasn't able to finish it up. But that'll basically flow up here, and then it'll dodge around the ABS system. It'll kind of feed right into the throttle body. And it does look like we'll be able to do that in one piece, so we won't hopefully have to put any extra joints in it.
Nice.
Just makes it for a little bit cleaner look. And then another thing we spoke about in the last video that we're going to be going ahead with is this is actually the actual steel bumper, what's left of it. But what we're going to do is where the pipes come out of the intercooler here, I'm going to weld on a couple of little brackets, and those will pick up a bolt through here, and that bolt will basically lock that in place, so that once this is clamped in, we're not just relying on the pressure of these clamps to hold the pipes in place. That fitting will lock it in place, so that even essentially if we exceed the capacity of these springs to hold it together, those springs are only going to hold the boost in the pipe. They're not going to hold the pipe in position.
Right.
So that'll be a big deal. That's the positive affixation that I was talking about last time. And then at the turbo we have a V-band, and at the throttle body that I'm pointing at that doesn't exist yet, we'll have a Wiggins style clamp. We'll have a Pegasus clamp, which is again a positive affixation. It cannot,
right,
barring disaster, it can't come free.
Yeah, and that goes back to kind of what I spoke about too when we were talking about that. Just, I see just common issues down the road. If I can think about them ahead of time and alleviate them before they become a problem, it's just one less thing we got to work out in the end. Because anytime you do any kind of build on this scale, I mean, it's just a given. There's going to be things there's going to be bugs, stuff you didn't think about or perceive that are just going to come out. We're going to have to work through. So if we can try and keep that to a minimum and think about stuff in the future, I mean, it's all helpful stuff. And one thing I found is just I keep seeing guys on booths, they just keep blowing out pipes and stuff. So if we can keep all those, we know that's not going to be an issue. That'll be one less thing we got to deal with in the future. It looks like we got some of the. This is for the cold side.
Yeah. These are the charge pipes. So this is actually this will be the 90 off the turbo.
Okay.
So what you see right here is essentially what will get used to get the rest of it. So this actually picks up on the driver's side intercooler outlet, and then I ran out of gas here, which is why the welds look like boogers. But that'll get fixed once it gets more argon. And then essentially what will happen is from the throttle body, it comes out, kind of does one of these. These aren't cut to length yet. But essentially, if this was shorter, this is the throttle body. So this will come out of the intercooler. It'll dodge around, come up through that great big honking hole, and then this will feed into the throttle body.
Perfect.
So there'll be a cone here because the throttle body inlet's about 4 inches external diameter at that point. So we'll put a little cone there.
Okay.
And then this pipe will be the one that feeds for the outlet of the compressor housing.
Okay. Perfect.
So.
All right. Well, we've got some good progress made for sure, and we kind of have a feeling of what's going on next with everything and where we're going. So stay tuned for more.